Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Cherished Quilt by Amy Clipston. Narrated by C.S.E. Cooney. Prologue. Christopher Hostettler shivered, despite the hot June sun beating down on his black church hat. The scent of moist earth assaulted his senses, and calluses stung his palms as he stared at the fresh pile of dirt he had helped shovel over the coffin with his 17-year-old brother's body inside. The minister recited a prayer, but it played as background noise to Chris's anguish. Only a few days ago, Chris and Gabriel had been working side by side in the pasture, helping their father train horses. Now Chris stood next to his older brother, Paul, surrounded by hundreds of community members who'd come to pay their last respects. He was stuck in a dream. No, he was stuck in a nightmare. It was as if he were floating above the crowd, watching the chilling scene play out in front of him. His mother's keening broke through his thoughts and hurled him back to reality. He turned his head to his right. Mom was holding on to Dat for support, and grief grabbed him by his shoulders and shook him. Gabriel was gone forever. When the minister's prayer ended, a murmur of conversation spread throughout the crowd. Paul spoke quietly to a friend as some of the community members slowly made their way back to their buggies that lined the long street. To Chris's right, Dat spoke softly into Mom's ear. The sight of his parents consoling each other tore at his heart. Chris raised a trembling hand and wiped away the sweat on his forehead. "Chris?" He turned to where Sally Zook suddenly stood beside him, wringing her hands. Her dark eyes were red-rimmed, and her pink cheeks were tear-stained. A pang of sorrow ripped through him as he recalled the days Gabriel talked about Sally non-stop. Gabriel had liked her since they were in school together, but he had never shared his feelings with her. Now he never would. "I'm so sorry, Chris. I can't believe he's—" A sob escaped from her throat. She took a deep breath and swiped at the tears trickling from her eyes. "I just spoke to Gabriel at church last Sunday. I'll never have the chance to talk to him again." Unable to speak past the lump swelling in his throat, Chris looked at the knot of mourners behind Sally to avoid her grief-stricken eyes. Selina Chupp was weaving through the crowd. As she hurried toward him, his shoulders tensed. Selina met his gaze, and Chris's stomach twisted with apprehension. He turned to his right, intent on walking away, but he was trapped by people surrounding his parents. If only he could get away and avoid talking to Selina. She was the last person he wanted to see today. Selina sidled up to Sally and placed her hand on her slight shoulder while keeping her eyes focused on Chris. She shook her head as her dark eyes misted over. "Oh, Chris, I can't believe it. I don't even know what to say." A tear slid down her cheek. "It's a terrible tragedy." Chris swallowed and pressed his lips together, fighting against the memory of...
"How could you let this happen, Christopher?"
He flinched at the harsh words, and then turned his face to his glaring father. "What do you mean?"
"This is your fault."
Dat pointed toward the freshly covered grave.
"If you hadn't been so irresponsible, your brother would still be alive."
Chris heard both Selina and Sally gasp. Chris's eyes widened as he took in the fury in his father's hazel eyes. Dat blamed him, even more than he'd been blaming himself. "You think this is all my fault?" Chris jammed his finger into his own chest. When Dat merely stared, he added, "I didn't kill Gabriel."
"Yeah, you did."
Dat nearly spat the words at him.
"You're the older brother and you knew better. Once again you ignored my instructions, and you failed, Gabriel. In fact, you failed this family. I should have known better than to leave you in charge. You can't handle it."
He glared at Selena, and back at Chris again.
"You're too easily distracted, and you don't think about anyone but yourself."
Chris's breath came out in a whoosh, and he winced, as if his father had struck him.
"How can you blame me like this? I never meant to." "You didn't mean to, but there's nothing you can do to fix this."
Dat was seething.
"Gabriel is gone now. He's dead, Christopher, and we can never bring him back."
Tears stung Chris's eyes. Turning back toward the grave, he could almost feel his father's furious stare boring into him. His younger brother was gone, and as Dat said, there was nothing he could do to fix this. Chris closed his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest in an effort to stop his body from trembling. A tear trickled down one cheek. How could he go on without Gabriel, and with the guilt? That was cruel to place all the blame on him for Gabriel's death, but he was also right. Gabriel would be alive if it weren't for him. Chapter 1. Emily Fisher hummed to herself as she walked down the rock path leading from her parents' large farmhouse to the harness shop her father co-owned with their next-door neighbor. The warm September breeze whipped the skirt of her blue dress against her legs and hinted that cool weather was not in a hurry to visit Lancaster County. The sign for the bird-in-hand harness shop came into view as she approached the one-story white-clapboard building. The 3 parking spaces in front of the store were empty, as was the hitching post that welcomed horses and buggies. Her father and his best friend Hank were no doubt busy back in the shop's work area while waiting for the day's first customers. As she stepped into the shop, a bell over the door announced her entrance. As always, she took in the familiar aroma of leather. The showroom in the one-room building was filled with displays of leather harnesses, leashes and collars for pets, saddles, doorknob hangers with bells, rope, pouches, bags, and various other horse accessories such as saddle blankets. The sales counter sat in the center of the packed showroom, with small round displays peppered with leather keychains in shapes varying from cats to horses. Beyond the showroom was where her father and Hank were busy creating items to sell. Emily worked her way between displays to their work area. "Gute, Maria," Emily sang.
"Hi, Emily."
That gave her a wide smile. Although he was in his early 50s, his light brown hair and matching beard were threaded with gray. His deep brown eyes were bright with question.
"Are you done helping your mom in the house already?"
"Mom said I should help you with the books this morning, and then help her cook for the Anglicers tonight." Emily fingered the hem of her black apron. "It's going to be a big group, so we have a lot to do."
"You're hosting a supper on a Wednesday?"
Hank raised his eyebrows. Although he and Dat were about the same age, Hank's brown beard had a hint of gray.
"Don't you normally have Anglicers come on Fridays?"
"Yeah, that's true." Emily nodded, and the ties to her prayer cap bounced in agreement. They asked if they could come tonight. They have activities booked through the rest of the week, so Mom agreed to it. We don't want to turn them down and lose their business.
"You can work on the books another day,"
Dat said.
"I know how hard you and Mom work to prepare for the meals."
"It's fine. I can take a look at them and then go back to help Mom. It's too early to start cooking, and I cleaned the house nearly all day yesterday. I have plenty of time to get ready for the meal." She paused.
"Is Christopher still starting at the shop today?"
"Yeah," Hank said. "He should be here shortly. I told him to take his time coming in this morning." "Oh, good." She smiled. "I can't wait to meet him. I'll send him back to you when he arrives.
Donkey,
Hank said. Emily moved behind the counter by the cash register and pulled out the accounting book from the bottom drawer. She was engrossed in calculating the month's sales when the bell above the door chimed to greet a customer. Gute Maria. Emily looked up from the ledger to see a tall young man watching her from just inside the front door. She smiled. You must be Christopher. He gave her a slight nod, but no return smile. In fact, his expression was so passive he was nearly frowning. Welcome. I'm Emily Fisher. When he didn't respond, her smile faded. She took in his appearance. His hair was light brown with flecks of gold, reflecting in the sunlight pouring in through the windows behind him and skylights above him. He was handsome, really handsome. His eyes were a brilliant hue of blue-green, and he had a long, thin nose, chiseled cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a clean-shaven face. But his good looks seemed a stark contrast to his bleak, dull expression as he stared at her. Well, I'll get your uncle for you, Emily offered, turning toward the work area. Hank!
Christopher!
Hank came into the showroom and crossed to where Christopher still stood by the front door.
Come in. This is Leroy's youngest doctor, Emily.
He gestured toward her.
Emily, this is my nephew, Christopher Hostettler. His mum is my Schwester, Agnes.
We met. She smiled again in an attempt to lighten the mood. Christopher nodded again as he came nearer, but his cold expression didn't change. That appeared behind Hank.
So, this is Christopher. I've heard a lot about you. I'm so glad you came to work with us.
Danke, Christopher said softly. Before more could be said, the bell above the door rang again, and 2 Englishmen entered the store. Hank excused himself and started answering their questions about the saddles on display. The phone in the work area rang, and Dat hustled to answer it. Christopher was staring at the toes of his work boots. Emily longed to pull him into a conversation and make him feel comfortable. So, Christopher, she leaned forward on the counter. How was your trip?
Fine.
Oh, well, I guess you're pretty tired, huh? Maybe a little empathy would get a friendly response. It's a long trip from Ohio, right? Christopher shrugged, still looking at the floor. When did you get here?
Last night.
He suddenly looked up at her, his blue-green eyes locking with hers. She tried to think of something else to say, but she was dumbfounded by his frosty demeanor.
Christopher,
Dat called from the work area.
Come on back, and I'll start you off with some simple leather work. Today, you're going to learn how to make a leash.
Christopher left without giving Emily a second glance. She stared after him. Did this man treat everyone so coldly? Later that morning, Emily entered the kitchen where her mother sat at the large table, staring down at her favorite cookbook. She glanced up and smiled. Emily had inherited her blonde hair and blue eyes from her mother, but she didn't think anyone could be as beautiful as Mum was. What are you looking at? Emily sank into the chair across from her.
I was just looking up a few recipes I want to try for our next Anglischer dinner. I think we should change up the menu.
Mum peered up at her.
Is something wrong?
Emily shrugged before resting her arms on the table and frowning. After her awkward conversation with Christopher, he spent the remainder of the morning in the work area with her father and Hank. As far as she could tell, he never glanced back at her, and he didn't acknowledge her before she left the shop. Christopher had completely snubbed her attempts to be friendly.
Emily?
Mum's expression filled with concern.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Hank's nephew started today at the harness shop.
Oh,
How is he?" Mum tipped her head. Emily's shoulders slumped as she scowled. "He's nothing like Hank." "What do you mean?" "He's not friendly at all." Emily relayed the brief conversation she had with Christopher, and Mum's eyes widened with surprise. "I can't figure out why I couldn't seem to make him feel welcome." "I'm certain it wasn't anything you did," Mum insisted. "You always go out of your way to be nice to people. In fact, you always consider everyone else's feelings before your own." "I've never had anyone be so rude to me." Emily absently drew circles on the blue tablecloth with her finger. "I tried to pull him into a conversation, but he only gave me terse responses. I just thought we should get to know each other since I work at the shop too." "Just be yourself and let him warm up to you. Maybe he was nervous about working with Hank and your debt. Maybe he's never worked in a shop before." "Yeah, maybe that was it. Dad said he was going to teach him something easy on his first day." But her mother's encouragement did little to settle her concern. She couldn't accept the idea of someone not liking her, but she also couldn't imagine feeling uncomfortable at her father's shop. If that was Christopher's problem, she would do everything in her power to help him feel like he belonged. Emily was setting the table for their English guests when her older sister Rachel rushed into the kitchen. At 23, Rachel was tall like their older sister Veronica, but she was the only one of the three who had inherited their father's light brown hair and deep brown eyes. Other than being the youngest, Emily's only distinction in the family was that at 5'4", she was also the shortest. "How was your day?" Emily asked. "Good, good. How was yours?" Rachel glanced around the kitchen, her eyebrows knitting together. "We have a dinner tonight?" "Yeah, did you forget?" Rachel blushed. "I'm so sorry. I wouldn't have stayed after school to grade papers if I had remembered." "It's fine." Mum pulled baked chicken from the oven. "Just go get cleaned up and you can help us put the meal together. The group will be here in about 30 minutes. Rachel disappeared up the spiral staircase. "Sometimes I think Rachel is so wrapped up in Mike that she forgets things," Emily said as she finished setting the table. She was referring to Rachel's boyfriend, Mike Lance. Rachel had fallen in love with Mike last spring. "I really can't blame her, though." Mum snickered. "From what I remember, that's how young love is. It permeates your mind like a cheerful fog." Emily sighed. When would she meet the right man and fall in love? She dreamed of having a home and family, but Rachel taught at the special school for children who needed extra help, and their parents needed Emily at home all day. She split her time between working in the harness shop and helping her mother with the household chores. She also made quilts to sell at the market and helped host dinners for Anglishares. Rachel reappeared in a fresh green dress. "What can I do to help?" "Would you get out the glasses and fill a pitcher with water?" Mum set freshly baked bread on a platter. The delicious aroma blended with the chicken and wafted over the kitchen. "Yeah." Rachel headed toward the cabinets. "So, how were your days?" "Emily has a new co-worker." Mum set the bread on the table. "Hank's nephew arrived from Ohio. I think Dad told you Christopher is going to work with Hank and your dad for a while?" "Oh, yeah." Rachel raised her eyebrows. "How old is he? Is he handsome?" Emily took the first 2 glasses from her and set them on the table. "I don't know how old he is, and I don't think he likes me." "But is he handsome?" Rachel prodded with a grin. "Rach, don't start, okay?" Emily wasn't in the mood for her sister's teasing. Lately, Rachel had taken to trying to set Emily up with Mike's friends from his church district, but it never seemed to work out. It wasn't that Emily was picky or even that she had unrealistic expectations of what a relationship should be. Yes, she wanted to find someone she could talk to, and who would listen to her and relate to her. But that wasn't all. She wanted to feel a spark. She wanted true love, like Veronica had with her husband. Veronica had once told her Jason was her best friend, but she was also attracted to him. Emily wanted the same thing, a man who was her best friend, but also warmed her heart. Did I miss something? Rachel turned toward Mum. Let's just say Christopher wasn't very friendly to Emily, Mum said. What do you mean? Rachel asked. As they finished preparing the meal, Emily told her about her brief conversation with Christopher. I can't believe he wasn't friendly to you, Rachel said, frowning. Dad grew up with Hank, so we're practically family. Emily nodded, feeling more confused than ever. Rachel's frown softened. Well, I was awfully rude to Mike the first time I met him, and Mike forgave me. What are you saying? Emily opened a nearby cabinet and pulled out a stack of cookbooks her mother sold for a friend at dinners. I'm just saying maybe Christopher will realize you were just being nice, and he'll apologize. Rachel shrugged. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe. Emily worried her lower lip as her recollection of the coldness in Christopher's face sent a shiver through her. Had she misinterpreted what was going on with him? Had there been sadness or even anger in those cold eyes? They're here, Mum said. The hum of the van's engine and crunch of the tires on the rock driveway drew Emily's attention to the window above the sink. She pushed thoughts of Christopher away and prepared herself for the evening. She needed to concentrate on serving food and answering questions about their Amish culture. Chris, help me, Gabriel cried from somewhere in the distance. Where are you, Gabriel? Where are you? Chris's pulse pounded in his ears as he ran toward the back of the pasture at his father's farm and searched for his younger brother. His body was shaking, and his head was spinning with fear combined with adrenaline. Chris rounded a corner, and a strangled sob escaped from deep in his throat as he found Gabriel lying on the ground, covered in blood. Chris fell to his knees beside him and touched his arm. Gabriel, he croaked as tears snaked down his hot cheeks. Please open your eyes. I'm so sorry. His voice broke as sobs racked his body. Chris's eyes flew open. He was drenched in sweat. He rolled onto his side and stared at the plain white bedroom wall. It was just a dream, another nightmare. Gabriel was still dead, and it was still Chris's fault. He rubbed his wet eyes. He'd been crying again. As usual, the dream was so real that he was transported back to his father's pasture, reliving the horrible day that changed his life forever. But this time Gabriel begged him for help, and Chris was too late to save him. He shoved himself to a sitting position. He glanced around the unfamiliar, sparsely decorated bedroom, and for a moment he was disoriented. Then reality whacked him in the gut. He was at Uncle Hank's house in bird in hand. Moving in with Uncle Hank was Chris's last-ditch effort to somehow pull his life back together after Gabriel's death nearly 3 months ago. He scrubbed his hands down his face and inhaled a jagged breath. Chris swung his legs over the side of the double bed and stood. He turned toward the battery-operated digital clock on the nightstand. The bright green numbers read 1:05. He'd managed to get 2 hours of sleep, which was a new record. Most nights the nightmares woke him every 30 minutes, like clockwork, He flipped on the lantern and padded down the stairs to the kitchen, careful not to wake his aunt and uncle, who were asleep in their bedroom on the first floor. After filling a glass with water, he stepped out onto the back porch and sat down on the swing. More tears threatened Chris's eyes, and he took a deep, trembling breath. He didn't want to cry. He'd cried too much already, and he had to find a way to move past his grief. With his hand shaking, he lifted the glass and took another sip of water. His gaze moved to the house next door, the Fisher family's home. Chris had noticed the large white clapboard house when the taxi steered into Uncle Hank's driveway Tuesday evening, after the endless bus ride from his parents' farm in Sugar Creek, Ohio. The Fisher house had a large wraparound porch at the front and a smaller porch at the back. Uncle Hank spoke highly of Leroy Fisher and his family, explaining that Hank and Leroy had gone into business when they were in their 20s. Just like Chris's brother Paul, Uncle Hank was a man who'd known what he'd wanted at a young age. His path had been settled long ago. Chris admired his uncle, who was warm and forgiving, a stark opposite to Chris's father. Chris longed to get his life in line too, but he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. Chris stared at Leroy's house as an image of Emily Fisher's face filled his mind's eye. She was so pretty, beautiful actually, with her soft facial features reminding him of a doll, golden hair peeking out from under her prayer covering, and sky-blue eyes. She seemed so sweet and kind. Chris cringed as he recalled their conversation earlier in the day, as if he could call it a conversation at all. Why had he been so rude to Emily when she tried to talk to him? It was obvious she was straining to pull him into a conversation, but Chris had quashed her kindness as if she were an annoying bug. Chris lifted his eyes to the sky, taking in the bright, twinkling stars as the cool night air seeped through his t-shirt and into his skin. He knew exactly why he'd been rude to Emily. There was no use trying to be friends with anyone. He wasn't good at relationships, and he certainly did not want to be too friendly with a woman. Emily's confused stare had weighed heavily on him as he worked beside her father, though. He should apologize to her, but what could he say? She most likely had already written him off as a horrible person. Regret settled on his shoulders, and a headache brewed behind his temples. Chris stood and wandered back into the house, set the glass in the sink, and quietly made his way up to the spare room. He placed the lantern on the nightstand, climbed back into the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Mom had once told him he should lay his burdens at God's feet. If only he remembered how to pray. His ability to talk to God had died the day Gabriel was killed. Chris hoped coming to Bird in Hand would somehow lead him back to God and heal his soul. But as he lay awake for the next few hours, he wondered if that was even possible. Chapter 2. Emily sat at the counter in the harness shop Thursday morning and chatted with a customer as she rang up 2 keychains, a saddlebag, a horse blanket, and 2 reins. The bell above the door chimed, and she had the sense that whoever had come in was looking at her. She glanced to her left and saw Christopher standing by the door with his intense gaze locked on her. His demeanor was different than the day before. This time she was sure his eyes seemed sad. "Here you go." The customer handed her a stack of dollar bills. "Thank you." Emily was suddenly self-conscious. She counted out the man's change and handed it to him. Then she put his items into 2 large paper bags for him. "Have a nice day," she said as he walked out the door. Emily sat back on the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?